Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome back to our Credible Business series. Today we're here with Melissa. Thanks so much for coming on, Melissa.
Sure.
And Melissa is with Property Management International. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're Property Management
Yeah.
International, Greater Philadelphia, and we are a
Okay.
franchise of PMI Corporation.
Awesome. Okay. Very cool. And I read a little bit about like your personal story and stuff online. So you got started in property management, but you were also investing in real estate before that?
Yeah, my husband and I bought our first investment property in 2008, so like right around the time of that crash. It did work out for us. But yeah, we just bought several small rental homes. We own a 5-unit building. We have a few 3-bedroom rentals. And then, yeah, it just got to the point where it was too much for me to do. So I was either going to have to hire a property manager or become one.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. It starts with your own portfolio and then you just expand to help other people with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was working full time and when you have like, 10 units, it's just like a little bit too much. So that's why I just decided to go into this full time because owning rental real estate was doing good things financially for my family and I wanted to help others do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like on the wrong day, 10 can be a lot. Actually, 10 properties
Yeah,
can
I
be a
mean,
lot.
and it does. It comes in waves. Like I would have weeks where everything was fine. I didn't hear from anybody.
Mhm.
And then, like I'm at work and, we just even just showing a property, right? Like a lot of them want to see them during the day. And it's like, oh,
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
show it. I'm working. So I took the leap and, bought a property management franchise.
So you had how many when you bought the franchise of your own?
I think it was either 10 or 11. And so we bought a franchise. So that didn't mean that we had any actual business when we started.
Right. Yeah.
So, we were kind of almost like living off of our SBA loan, until everything really got up and running and we had, clients and stuff like that.
Yeah. So how did it go? What did it look like your first couple of years? Like, how did you get your first couple clients? And what was the inception of the business like?
Yeah, I mean, that's the good thing about a franchise, right? Like, I knew it was going to be way too much to launch a business by myself. So they really took care of a lot of the advertising, the website, all of that stuff for me. We
Nice.
flew out to Utah for training. I had already had a realtor's license, so I had that portion of it covered. And then, we just kind of started getting clients. I mean, we were putting the advertising out there. People would call, I'd meet with them. People started signing up for the residential services. It is hard to get to that break even point, especially with an SBA loan payment. So that took us about a year and then COVID hit. So at that
Oh,
point, I
gosh.
honestly like shut off as much advertising as I could because I couldn't work as many hours because I had a 4-year-old at home. So I wanted to make sure we were still
Oh,
providing good service to our current clients and that, I was also able to watch my child because we lost, preschool camp, all of that. So we kind of took a pause in our growth and then we were able to start growing again. I did work some like after hours to train to open the HOA management portion of our business in 2020. So I was kind of ready to go with that once we were able to start like advertising and doing more things again. And so then we've been doing that portion of the business since 2020.
so you're doing HOA, residential, and commercial?
That's correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. And how many units do you manage? And I guess with HOA, it would be like how many accounts do you manage?
Yeah,
But
so we have 12 separate homeowners associations that we're currently
okay.
managing. And then right
Okay.
now we're at about 110 units, which includes mine.
Wow, that's a lot. I did property management for 10 years. I just recently stopped. So, how did it go transitioning into HOA management? I'm just curious from personal experience. Was it a huge learning curve or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like our software is the biggest learning curve. The software company that PMI partners with provides a really, really robust and extremely customizable system. I mean, they went with this system, I think, because you can manage anything with it in terms of HOAs, and it is dedicated for HOAs. Like some systems are like, oh, you can do both, but this really is designed for HOAs. It's designed to
Nice.
manage not just tiny ones, but, like a huge master association you can manage with this software. But that being said, because it is so customizable, it's like the learning curve is hard. We're still learning it, 5 years later.
Oh, I bet.
Some new, I have a new HOA who wants us to do something that, we haven't been asked to do before. And then I'm trying to like talk to support and talk to corporate, like, does it do this? I must do this, and figure out how to set it up. Or if there's features we haven't used in a while, it's not super intuitive. So that part is definitely difficult. We're much better than we used to be. And I see the value in using that type of software. So we're working with it. The actual management, I had to take some classes and all. So that's what I was kind of doing in my evenings during COVID, to get certified and learn more about HOAs. And then again, it's probably something I would not have started on my own, but having that franchise backing me up that, there's coaches, there's other franchisees. We have a little Facebook group. We can ask questions. The franchisee that manages over in Jersey, Kathy, has been phenomenal, allowing me to call and ask her questions as I go, but yeah, I really enjoy it. I enjoy working with my HOAs. I enjoy, I think our company's different than a lot that do the HOA management because a lot of them are bigger, and we're bigger in that we're part of that larger franchise. But like most of them, you're not getting the owner on a video chat like this, whereas they can get my calendar.
Oh, yeah.
I don't necessarily give out my cell phone. I don't go that far because I do need, I have a kid. I want to spend, the quality time. But if they're having a problem, if there's any concerns, if they want to talk to me, they can get on my calendar. That's a great, little piece of software. We're usually within 1 to 2 business days. It's like they can talk to me, and I encourage them to do that. And, if they have any feedback, I want to hear it because I want to provide them that personal service.
Yeah, I think that sometimes when companies get too big, it's just one of the things that you lose is that personal touch where the owner will actually get involved themselves and you feel it when a company gets to a certain size. So that's cool that you guys are at a size where you still have that personal touch as the owner and where you're still looking for feedback from your clients. And I think that's a very valuable thing to hold on to for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good segue because one of the things that definitely sets you apart is that you are a company where as the owner, you're involved. But what else do you think sets you apart from the other management companies in your area? Why do people tell you they choose you over other management companies in the area? What do you think is different about you guys?
Well, I don't know why they're picking me exactly, but I mean, I try when I talk to anyone to just really spend the time and answer the questions that they have. So, I mean, that's just kind of the way I sell myself, but it's also me getting a chance to know them because it needs to be a good fit both ways. Like, I don't want to just take any client, if the board member that's looking for the new association and they're going to be the board president and it just feels like, sometimes it just doesn't feel like a good personality match, then I might try to steer away from it. And same with like owners. Someone can call me and be like, I want to rent out my house. I'm moving out, and I don't know anything about renting a house. And like, whether they sign up with me or not, like I got into this business to help people own rental properties and do it in a way that like I find that if you treat your tenants well and you treat your property well and keep it in good maintenance, you're generally going to do better than if you don't, so I wanted to help people do that. So even if they don't sign up with me, I'm happy to talk with them, and educate them and say, if they have off the wall questions like, can I do this? Can I do that? I mean, I'm not an attorney. And so sometimes what I have to tell them is like, I don't know, you got to talk to an attorney on that one, but a lot of people don't know. City of Philadelphia is very heavy on you have to have your rental license, and a lot of people, if you never rented a property before, you don't know that, plus there's a ton of there's lead testing and paperwork. So I try to make them aware to manage their expectations. Like, hey, these are the things we could do for you, but here's what you're going to have to do. Here's the problems that are happening right now in the city with trying to get your rental license. So just trying to prepare them for that, because even if their answer is like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to own a rental property. I'm going to sell it, and it doesn't get me the business. I hope that I've helped that person. And then the people that do sign up, they know what to expect. So it's not a shock to them. They have to go through to get all of that. So I think maybe just that genuineness and that willingness to help, whether they're going to sign up with me or not, hopefully is appealing to people, and it makes my day better than just being a salesperson,
Absolutely. I think people can sniff it out. I think that transparency goes a very long way. And when you're just genuinely like, hey, my goal is not to be a fit for everyone. It's to be a fit for the people that I want to work with, and then vice versa. But also I'm happy to help a few people along the way. I feel like you can feel that authenticity if maybe you're the second or the third call that they're making, as opposed to someone that just wants to get you to sign the contract no matter what. And they don't really care about you or the details. And some companies will just sign anyone on too, which I think is a disservice to not only yourself if it's not a good fit, but also your other customers because the wrong person can take up a lot of your time,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, like, you have to have some money to own a rental property, and that's like,
Yes.
I can kind of tell sometimes by the way they're asking questions or, I mean, I don't know exactly how our prices compare to other people. We're charging what we need to charge to pay our staff and for us all to make a reasonable living. No, we're not getting rich over here, but when I start getting comments back like, oh, really? I didn't know property management cost that much. Or, can I hire my own contractor? Can I come? I mean, and that's usually fine if they want to give us their licensed and insured contractors information. But, I've had people call, well, I don't know. My Uncle Bob always did all my repairs. And I'm like, cool. Is he insured? Oh, no, but I'm not going to be happy if I can't use Bob. And I'm like, well, that's not a good fit for us because there's a lot of liability there, and it's kind of, I have to protect myself. I have to protect them. I've had people call and say like, I want you to place, decent people in my property. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I mean, we're going to screen on background and income and credit and all the normal things. But there's people out there who they want the final say. They want to look at them and like judge them. And I'm like, that gets into fair housing. Like we can't do that. And when I get a lot of pushback about those types of things, that's a big red flag for me. And I kind of know like, okay, like this is just not going to be a good fit. Or even
It's
like
a square peg, round hole. Yeah.
Yeah, like I had one lady and like literally every piece of advice I tried to give her, she's like, well, I'm not going to do that. I met her out at the property and I'm like, it's going to show better if you, replace these broken blinds. Or, I asked, I was like, I saw a couple of rooms and I'm like, are you going to have this clean? And she's like, I cleaned it myself. And I'm like, okay, but like, generally like you might have missed a couple spots, especially if it's like a high dollar property. I mean, this was like a $3,000 a month rental property. And it's like, if you're paying that much for a property, people are going to complain if there's like, if it just doesn't feel good. They have other options, to.
Yes. Yeah.
Honestly, that's any property. You need it to look good these days,
Yeah, and I think there has to be a certain amount of respect and understanding from the owner that they're hiring an expert for a reason and that maybe they don't know it all. And I think if their demeanor is like, yeah, I need your help, not, hey, I want you to do all the crap work for me while I boss you around and pick and choose your advice. You know what I mean? That is just not fun to manage for. But in general, I think the best property management companies are not just looking to take on any owner in any property that will hire them, but are going to choose to make sure that the properties they're offering are quality, that the owners that they're signing on are going to make sure that they prioritize taking care of their tenants as well. Because if you have an owner that's not going to fork up the money for an essential repair, it makes you look bad as the manager, So I feel like that being aligned sets you apart from other companies. For sure.
I mean, it's a big challenge in property management because I truly want to help people, and so when I get that owner like, please help me, I need this or I need that, or maybe they already have a tenant in there and they want to transfer it. Like, I really want to say yes. And sometimes I maybe even do a little bit too much. But then, like down the line, we're looking and they're saying like, well, I don't have the money to fix my property. And so then it's trying to see if they'll listen to my advice to maybe sell that property, or that maybe landlording isn't for everybody. And if you don't have the funds for those repairs, then it might not be a great choice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the respect to listen and be ready to take advice from someone that does it professionally is an important piece. If they have that, they don't have to know everything, but as long as they're willing to let you take the reins, I think that that's like a very helpful dynamic. So
yeah, and I do have some great clients, they do take great care of their properties, and when we call them about something, they ask insightful questions, and then we work well together, and those are the people I want more of.
Yes. So for those clients that you want more of and the ones that you enjoy working with, can you walk us through, because the average person doesn't know what full service means with property management. I'm sure you answer that question a million times a day. Or a million times a week. But what does full service mean when you say you offer full service management? If someone's wondering what that means, what does that mean from A to Z?
Yeah. And I mean, we actually have a blog on our website about like who is a good fit for property management and who is not, because some people, it's just not a good fit and you should manage your own property. Yeah. Absolutely. But full service means full service. So if they need a tenant, we will handle everything, we'll either take photos or arrange for them. We typically do an initial walkthrough and let them know if there's anything that's not photo or showing ready. We can arrange those repairs if they need that cleaning, they need something. We handle all that for them. We make sure the tenants are screened. We handle the lease, the paperwork. We do not handle the licensing. We encourage the owners to do that, but we provide instructions and coaching and help them. It's just because of who the city is going to talk to about different things. It makes more sense, I think, for them to get it, but pretty much that's it. I mean, once we have the tenants, they don't get the owner's contact information. Everything has to go through us. And when it comes to repairs, if it's under a certain amount, we just handle it because that generally keeps our vendors happy and willing to work with. It keeps our tenants happy because it's getting done fast. Obviously, the bigger repairs, we do contact our owners and work with them and talk to them about what's needed. But really, we want to make it as passive an investment as possible for our owners. And so, those are the majority of our clients, and most of them, that's exactly what they want. They want to own this property, have enough control over it, more than what you would in the stock market or something. You can have say over, are we raising the rent, things like that. But you don't necessarily want to be around the property or getting calls about things or talking to tenants. You probably have a full-time job or something, or you just don't have the availability. We have some other clients that we're maybe not a good fit for property management are those people who want, they want involvement in every single tiny repair. Our limit is $350. So, anything under that, we can kind of just get done. People that want to know their tenants. I mean, some people do, they want to form a personal relationship with tenants. I don't love that because, it's nice when it can happen and work out, but it is a business relationship. So if something goes wrong and you developed a personal relationship, it can get a little awkward. But some people want to be physically around their investment. I've had people who had a 5-unit building and they, wanted to watch, they had cameras in the backyard. They wanted to check on things. They wanted to drive by. They wanted to when a unit was vacant, they wanted to personally do all the work in there. They didn't want to give up contact with the tenant. So then it gets really weird because it's they have 2 contacts, they don't know who to go to and things like that. If that's the level of involvement that you want and you want to do all those things, then why would you pay a property manager? It doesn't make sense. You don't really want the service. Whereas those people who just want to be hands off, they don't want to have to deal with arranging repair in the middle of their weekend because the heater died, things like that, and are willing to have a little trust and let go. It can be a really great thing to make owning a rental property a lot less stressful.
100%. You said it really well. If you don't want to be hands off, that's great, but don't waste your money on a property manager.
Yeah, no. And I'd be the first person to tell you, because it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for the tenants because they're going to be confused about who to call. It's not going to be good for the property manager.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the exact phrase I use, So especially if I'm onboarding someone that has been self-managing, one of the first things I tell them is look, you have to be committed to stopping taking those tenant calls. You can write them a very nice note, saying that you're passing this off. But if they call you, you have to nicely and gently say, I'm really sorry, I'm not handling that anymore. You have to call the property manager. And that way you're just gently redirecting them and kind of making sure they remember, don't call the owner anymore because otherwise,
there's too many moving parts. It's a recipe for disaster and confusion for sure.
And that's when I get the angry tenant who's like, well, I reported this thing that was, my fridge was broken 3 days ago. Why haven't you done anything? And it's we don't have any record of that. Oh, well, I called the owner and the owner's not telling us because they're on vacation somewhere, and it's okay, well, now you've told the right person and we can start working on this for you,
Yes, I got to the point where I ended up telling people, we made it a policy that they agreed not to speak to their tenants. They one text to say, we're done talking to you in the nicest way possible. And if we found out they were talking again, we said, we've fired owners over it because that's how hard it makes our job. Just don't talk to them.
And then people are bad reviewing your company because you didn't do X, Y, and Z, but they communicated it to the owner and we never even knew we had to do X, Y, and Z or that anything was a problem. And the owner, for whatever reason, is assuming they're also communicating it to us. So that can be a challenge for sure. So, if you're ready to move on from self-management and you have tenants in the property, it's that's the best thing you can do is just 100%. Very firmly, I'm not going to talk to them anymore.
Yes. And I think property management is such an amazing intermediary to make, like you said, rental property a passive investment rather than something that's driving you crazy, because it can be all consuming. And if you don't know what you're doing, it can take up so much more of your time. And when a tenant knows they're talking to a property management company, they're so much less likely to expect favors, expect special treatment. When they're speaking to the owner directly and you have a relationship with that owner, they're way more likely to ask for concessions, pull heartstrings, things like that. So just the dynamic itself, I think, when you find a good property management company, just the dynamic of having the intermediary solves a lot of problems in itself for the owner.
Yeah. And it helps owners not create their own problems because, like I'm a fully licensed real estate broker. I just finished my continuing education. Every 2 years, they remind us about fair housing, and I can't tell you how many owners will ask for certain types of tenants. And I'm like, that would be illegal. I can't do that. And it's like, I imagine if they're putting these ads up on their own, they could actually get into some trouble there.
Yes. What you don't know, you don't know. And what you don't know could definitely hurt you in that case. So it's very valuable to have somebody that knows what they're doing to keep you out of legal trouble, for sure. For someone who owns rental property but feels overwhelmed, what are the top problems that you usually solve for them?
I mean, I think it really depends on what their problem is or why they're feeling overwhelmed. I mean, I've had people call a lot of times that are in the city and they have a bad tenant. I want to be straight. 95% of my tenants are great people. They do what they're supposed to do, take care of their home. But there's that little bit, and it's on both sides. I've said it multiple times. There's that 5% of owners and that 5% of tenants that all are not great people. People tend to search out. They can go online in Philadelphia, and I do manage in the suburbs and all too, but I see more of it in Philadelphia where they'll specifically find a property that doesn't have the license, and then the owner can't legally collect rent. So they will pay first month security deposit, move in, and then stop paying. And the owner's just like, what happened? And then they use all these delay tactics. And a few months later, they're calling a property manager because they finally figured out that they have to have a license and they don't know how to get the license. So that's some things we can work with. There are extra fees and stuff if we're already stepping in at that point. I'm friends with some insurance adjusters, right? And they're always like, call us first before you call your insurance company, right? Because if you say the wrong thing to your insurance company, it's harder for us to do our job. And it's the same thing. The other thing is a good fit for property management is somebody who doesn't want to have to learn all these laws. If you're going to self-manage, you need to know your local laws. And I know the counties surrounding Philadelphia, every township's different what they require for licensing and all of that, but you better know it, particularly in Philadelphia, So if you come to us after the fact and you've already got, a bad tenant and we have to go through eviction, I mean, not only are you paying the lawyer, but we do have to charge, some fees and all for our time because we know we're not getting, rent from them for a while. And it's a lot of kind of undesirable work that we're now going to be stepping in and doing and trying to get that person on track and all that, if we even can.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just hire us from the beginning, if you don't know the laws, don't want to keep up with it, and Philly changes them every 2 years, then I think you should definitely consider management because we can kind of keep everything straight from day one.
100%. I'm not familiar with Philadelphia at all, but it sounds like there's a lot of red tape. And when there's a lot of red tape, it's really good to have someone that knows it inside and out and not be guessing.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, we typically don't even get the license for our clients. Some of the suburban ones where you have to drive there, we will, because the owner's out of town, we'll handle it. But, they do have to be involved. And we at least can provide them step by step, literally step 1, click here. Step 2, click here. Do you get this error message? Do this, so we do our best to coach them through the process, and even just to make them aware, hey, here's the penalties if you don't have this. And you don't want to go there. So let's get it done, You mentioned earlier the focus on the tenant experience. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons. But why do you feel like taking care of tenants and prioritizing their experience is so important for the owner? Yeah, I mean, most of our tenants are great. First of all, if you have great tenants, you want to keep them, right? Because once they move out, even if they leave the place in great shape, you're still going to be paying the leasing fee. If they move out after a year, you're going to pay after a year to have us put another tenant in the property, right? And you never know, hopefully we're not going to have too much downtime, but you don't really ever know. And if you have someone who's great in there, of course, we're going to screen the next person just as well. But there's always that chance, that somebody might not be as great. So we want to keep that person happy. It's good for our management company. It's good for the community to take, care of the properties. And it's good for the owner. Like, this is an asset that you have, first of all. Like, if you buy something and just let it deteriorate, that it's not worth as much anymore. If you were to go and sell it. And I think offering properties that are in great condition is going to attract those great tenants. If you have a property and it doesn't look clean, or things are obviously falling apart or just poorly done, like the floors have got lumps and are wavy. I've seen people whose contractors can't install a floor, or there's this issue or that issue. You have to think about what kind of people is that going to try to, attract. Probably the people who don't have any better options. How are you going to get price? If you have a nicely done unit that looks well cared for and that's offered at $1,500, and your unit doesn't feel as well cared for, you're probably not getting $1,500. They're going to take the competition, You have to lower the price, and then you're getting applicants that a lot of times we can't even place in a property because they're not meeting the qualifications for the property because they can't get in anywhere nicer. You don't want to be in that situation. Certain areas, if all the surrounding properties have really nice amenities, second floor laundry and dishwasher and, nice things, to be competitive, a lot of times you maybe need to have those things too, or again, you're competing on price. But you can also do, in areas that are maybe not everyone has those amenities and people are looking at price, but you can still compete by just having everything look nice and in good condition. Don't give them, something that just looks like it's falling apart.
How do you feel like having a good management company that communicates well with the tenant, what ways does it affect the owner's bottom line?
It's just making sure that the tenant wants to stay in that property, and there's a lot of things that affect that, neighbors and all that stuff. But if somebody, if their heat's going down and, some things we can't get it fixed right away because it needs some specialty part, but at least if you're communicating with them, they understand, hey, the owner's not neglecting this. I'm not being ignored. You called this in, we're going to get in touch with you right away. We're going to let you know that the vendor's been assigned. And, if the vendor can't come out, I think we had one, it was literally 9:00 on New Year's Eve. And we're they are 24 hours. We let them know. We called 4 different vendors. The soonest we can get someone there is the second, we can give you a credit to buy some space heaters or something. And then it was a whole thing with a part, so it was a couple more days. That stuff can be tough, but I think they weren't too upset because they understand that we were doing everything possible to take care of them. We let them know the vendor had been assigned. We let them know how many people we'd called and when the soonest was. You can offer them a credit. You can, just like I said, just make sure that they feel as taken care of as it is logistically possible to do, and that they're updated on exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's so important because a lot of management companies will prioritize owner communication and then not prioritize tenant communication. And I don't think owners always see how much that property management company valuing the tenant's happiness affects their bottom line. It affects their vacancy rate. It affects how many years the tenant's going to renew for, all of that. I don't think that's common knowledge. So it's, I think, important for owners to know that you guys value tenant happiness. You know what I mean? And you can tell from this whole interview.
It's a relationship, and a lot goes into it. It's not just repairs. It's, one of our recommendations typically to owners is not to raise rent in the very first year, and to keep your raises, don't just be well, I have to raise rent every, 3% a year because of inflation or whatever. Let's actually look at what's in the neighborhood. Have rents actually gone up in that neighborhood? Or have they even gone down a little bit because of, things going on with the economy, and what kind of tenants do you have in here? Are we getting complaints from neighbors about them? Or, maybe you don't want to renew them at all. Or are they just great people who are taking care of the house and paying their rent every month? Is it okay to sometimes be a little below market rate? That's up to the individual owner. For myself, if I can afford to on a property, I will let it go a little below market rate if the tenants are great. If they're calling me and kind of making unreasonable requests and being, potentially not the best, then I might not feel as great about giving them that.
At the end of the day, sometimes slightly under market is better for your bottom line. Like if you look at the annual revenue,
Right.
like if you're having to turn the property, pay to rent it and pay for the vacancy time, sometimes being a little under isn't actually a little under if you're looking at it annually. And I
Yeah.
think that education piece too is, I just think that's so important. And that's like one of the hidden benefits of hiring a good management company is that knowledge, you know what I mean? That's going to go a long way, not only with the tenant relationship, but with your wallet.
Like I said, it's all builds into the relationship. So that way, if something does happen down the line and you're like, man, I can't get this heater part for a few days, it's gonna go over better and not have them be like, this is it, I'm out of this place, it's a slum, I want to move, if you have that history where it's like, oh, I just renewed my lease for the second year and they didn't automatically just take up my rent, like that's kind of cool. Or I've had a few other repairs and they got someone out there within a day and they're communicating, like all those things add together so that maybe they're not gonna ask for a credit back.
100%. That rapport goes both ways.
Yeah, better about the whole thing, whereas if you have owners who are just like, nope, I gotta raise it every year and are slow to provide the money for those repairs and things like that, I think they're a lot more likely to have the turnover, which is then going to cost the money potentially in the long run.
100%. When someone's shopping for a management company, I think the concerns that I've heard is like, how easy is it to get a hold of somebody? Am I going to be able to get a hold of somebody when I have a question about my property, my account, my statement, my tenant? How long would they have to wait for a response? So what do you guys have in place that sets you apart as far as communication goes for an owner to know that they can get a hold of somebody?
So we are a small business. It's myself and 3 full-time, 1 part-time staff member. We're not huge. And as property managers, we do spend a lot of time on the phone, So if you just randomly call our office, it might be the same where you're just leaving voicemails, and I know that's frustrating. So first of all, we do encourage our owners wherever possible to contact us by email. And typically we're going to respond within 1 business day is certainly our goal. Many times it's minutes, because if I'm sitting there on hold with, say a vendor or a utility company or somebody, that hold can be 45 minutes and I'm just banging out emails, the whole time. It's like I practice inbox 0 personally. I'm encouraging my staff to do the same, and like today's Friday, like I'm going to make sure that everything that's like an owner wanting something, question, whatever is done before I leave for the day. I won't enjoy my weekend if it's not,
Absolutely.
So I understand some people don't like email. They prefer a phone call. I have a Calendly link and that's in the signature of all my emails. And again, that's like another way, like I just encourage them like, look, yeah, we are on the phone a lot. Let's leave each other voicemails all day long. Like just click that link. Typically they can get a next day appointment. Sometimes, if I have a lot of meetings or something, it might be like 2 days, but they can always click that link. And I love that tool because I think we set up this meeting through that tool. And right now, like I'm not answering my phone, like the time is set aside, so if an owner, clicks and books half an hour with me, they have that 30 minutes, they can ask whatever they want. We can do a Zoom, we can screen share. It doesn't matter who else is calling. Like I'm 100% theirs for that amount of time. And I think that helps a lot. My staff have them as well. So if they have questions, they can always schedule that appointment. But like I said, if they want the fastest response, we're all very fast through email.
Yeah. And that is something that I don't think a lot of people realize is how phone heavy property management is. You are literally always on the phone. And so like, unless you can have 2 conversations at once, which you can't, it's really cool that you offer your Calendly link though. I haven't heard that from a lot of managers. I think that's a really awesome thing to give, like just to say, hey, email me, or you can get 30 minutes of my time and I'll Zoom you and I'll show you anything you want to see. I feel like that's a great thing to offer to owners. And just to know, like there are property management companies, because a lot of times when you answer the phone, it's not good news. That's just the nature of the business.
True. Yeah, we're calling to tell you your hot water heater went or something like that.
Yeah, and like I think the biggest issue with property managers, and I understand it from being in the industry, but I think the worst thing that people fall into is screening calls. And then the owners start to feel like panicky because they're like, oh, I actually can't get a hold, or just avoiding emails. Like that happens with a lot of companies because it's just negative, negative, negative. And if you don't have the right people in the seat, they'll just avoid communication. So it's awesome. My point is, it's great that you have such a quick email response time and that you've got an available calendar for people to book to speak to you. I think that definitely sets you guys apart.
Yeah. And then we also use Property Meld like for the maintenance stuff, which I really like that software because the owners can decide if they want, text message through it and everything's documented. Like the whole chat is documented. But a lot of owners love doing that stuff through text because they do work full time, and so like if we do have to like replace a hot water heater, they can get a text alerting them, hey, there's an estimate, can you approve it? Usually we put the amount right in the chat. If they want to see the actual estimate or pictures or whatever, then they do have to like log in and they can look at that stuff. But they're not having to check their personal email at work, or they have that option of just getting those alerts right on their text, so they can just like step out and deal with something real quick if they need to approve it.
It's like an instant messenger kind of property meld, and it's all in one place. That's awesome. What should someone look for when choosing a property management company from your experience?
I mean, I think they should just ask questions. Like it might not even be like the biggest company or whatever is the best, but I would say, asking those questions that you just asked about availability, like who's my kind of backup contact? I mean, we're a departmentalized company, so we have one person that handles maintenance, one person that handles bookkeeping. But, in the end, if they're not getting what they're needing or anything, like I'm available, right? So like asking those questions about like who's available, like that type of stuff. I'd also ask like what else they do, because there's definitely property management companies out there that are, I would say, like more of a real estate brokerage, and then they do a little management on the side. And that doesn't make them a bad company, but I would just be very aware of like in that case, like what percentage of their business is actually property management? Are there staff members who that's their full-time job, that type of thing, as opposed to maybe people that are doing it on the side, and make sure that they use like a property management software, like that they're still using spreadsheets or whatever. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the greatest these days. I don't think it matters so much which software as long as it's for property management. So I would definitely, just look into that and see if you can talk to the person who would essentially be in charge of the work. I mean, I do our sales for our company, but I'm also, even though my staff does a ton of stuff, ultimately I'm in charge. If there's a problem, a question, they can come to me, so they're talking to me and they have to feel comfortable with me. It has to feel like a good fit. So I would say like, if they're just talking to someone that only does sales, that's fine. And if they like the pricing and they like what they're hearing about the company, I would just say before making a decision, ask if you can talk to the person you'd actually be working with. And I'd see like, how big is the company and what feels like a good fit for you? I mean, some people may love if it's like a one-person management company, and those can still be really good,
Yeah.
But, in that case, you might want to say like, well, what happens if you're sick? What happens if you're on vacation? Like, what's your backup plan? Asking those types of questions and making sure you like that person. If it's a big regional company, you might want to look into if there's any way to find out like what their turnover rate is going to be, or look at Google reviews is always great. Property management companies, it is hard to keep up near 5 stars because you may have
tenants.
You have tenants that go on there that are maybe not happy because they're being evicted, but that doesn't mean you're a bad property manager. It might mean you're a good one, right?
Yes, yeah.
I've even had people come on and I've been able to get them removed, but they've left 1-star reviews, and I'm reading their story and I'm like, this isn't our company. Like, this has never happened. One person was raving about how they like went to court and won on like a security deposit thing. And I'm like, that has never happened. You have the wrong company, so there's all that stuff. But, there's some of us out there that are able to maintain like at least a reasonable rating, like, compare a few companies and see how many reviews they actually have and what are people actually saying. You're always going to have some people that are a little unhappy or maybe have the wrong company even. But,
Yes.
I think that stuff can be important to like just checking that out. And like I said, if you can talk to the person who will be doing your management, how do you feel about them? The other thing I would say is really big when you're choosing a management company is a lot of people want to call me and they're like, okay, well, they know management companies usually take a percentage of the rent, and so they'll say, well, what's your monthly fee? They may think that that's the only fee, or they may get like a couple of quotes where they provide like 1 or 2 fees, but like really ask for and get in writing to come compare the full pricing, because you may have one management company that's charging like, a higher percentage, and you may just immediately write them off and say like, oh, nope, they're not for me. I talked to people who are like 3 and 4% lower. Why would I ever hire this company? And then when you get your actual contract and you're all ready to move forward, it's like, oh, this one has an onboarding fee and a technology fee and a fee. And, the one that was charging higher maybe doesn't have any fees at all. So you really want to compare like the full package.
It's all inclusive. Yeah. And also, I tell people all the time, I used to tell people anyway, I said, we have some negative reviews, but go read those and you'll find out they're actually good reviews if you're an owner. Like, it will be somebody upset that we defended the owner and collecting a security deposit, which of course the tenant's not happy. There's hidden gems in the bad reviews that show that the management company's doing their job, is my point. So
there is. Yeah, it just sucks because it brings that star rating down. So you always want to read the actual reviews. Make sure, I would say, you want a company that's paying attention and responding to those reviews.
Yes, for sure.
There's always going to be some negatives.
If you could give one piece of advice to a property owner to protect their investment, what would it be?
Oh, I'm going to cheat and do 2 because I really can't.
Okay. That's so fine.
The first would be make sure you're appropriately funded to deal with basically worst case scenarios. It doesn't happen often, but wherever you're located, how long does it take to evict somebody, from the time they stop paying? Because like in Bucks or Montgomery County, you might be able to do it in like certainly less than 3 months, maybe even 2 months. But in Philadelphia, it's probably about 7 or 8 months till they're actually out.
Wow.
So if you have a mortgage and expenses on that property, you're gonna like have the money in the bank or a plan, line of credit, whatever it is that you're gonna be comfortable with to maintain your bills on that property. At the same time, similar, you want to look at repairs and being ready to do them. And a lot of people think because they bought a newly renovated property or they paid a contractor to renovate their property and everything's new, that they aren't going to have to worry too much about repairs for the first few years. And again, ideal situation, that is the case. But I've absolutely seen owners found and paid a contractor, and then a year later, the floor, like there's gaps in it, it's sliding around, like it just wasn't done properly and the contractor's long gone. Now you got a tenant living in there with stuff in the property, so replacing a floor is going to be more expensive because they got to move all the, the tenant's belongings and things like that around. There's things like that pop up, and no matter, like, you better be really sure about the contractor you hired, but I would keep a reasonable chunk of money available so that it doesn't hurt as bad if something like that comes up, or that new roof you put on, like they totally screwed it up, and same, like sometimes contractors aren't around, or there's those issues. So just be prepared to take care of all of those things that could go wrong. The cheapest contractor is often the most expensive contractor. So
yes, 100%.
Sometimes they're even more expensive, but like really know who you're hiring. All of our contractors for the most part are people that we've worked with long term, we have a relationship with. It's nothing's ever a guarantee, but I think we have a pretty good record with the people we're working with because they know they're going to keep getting business from us, and they're all, insured and licensed people. And
a lot of them vetted too, like it's not your first rodeo usually with them.
Yeah.
We would find a lot of our vendors from an owner that would say, can we use my contractor? Mm-hmm. And if they were good, then we'd keep using them. So that's a huge value of having a management company as well, as those vendor relationships, because it's not easy. So
yeah, there's a lot of really poor quality contractors out there. And then the other thing I would say is being aware of local law or hiring a manager who is, because it depends on where you're at. Some townships, you might get a fine, you might get a pretty hefty fine if they find out you're renting your property and don't have a license, and it doesn't matter, you didn't know that you needed one. And
yes,
yeah. In the city of Philadelphia, there's a huge amount of penalties that could come from not having your rental license. So,
yes.
Not just brushing that off as like, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. It's not important.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask where people can find you if they need help with their properties? And can you like maybe just give a phone number and like the website?
Email and web is always our favorite communication because we do spend a lot of time on hold. So really the best way is my Calendly link is actually out there. It's on the website. It's www.greaterphilipm.com. So it's like the city of Philadelphia. And then right on that homepage, there's a big orange button that says schedule a consultation. That's that Calendly link again, where it'll put someone right on my calendar. And I just recommend if you could fill in the little box that says why you're calling. Because if you're a random name and I don't know you, I'd like to just know what you want to talk about in advance. If you do want to call our office, we're 215-995-3093.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. This was so fun, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Okay, thanks.